Great. Well, good afternoon. I want to talk about some of my favourite topics: life, death, and love, and the connections between those kind of things. And one of the things we've been asked to do as speakers is talk a little bit about what got us here. And this is my grandmother, Molly Mitchell, caving in the deepest pothole in Great Britain in the 1930s. So this is her in the bosun's chair being winched down here. So I grew up as a child on holidays with my grandparents, hearing stories about amazing things adventures did. And she did this caving, but she was chair of the local health board in the 1950s in Yorkshire, which is the one place you wouldn't find women in charge of anything going on there. Incredible woman who both had this sense of adventure, but also made change happen. And this is my mother. This is my mother, age 6, in the same pothole, dressed, as you can tell, for a caver. Yeah, so she was taken down the deepest pothole in Britain at age 6 and kind of did these amazing journeys of exploration. I just love the idea of people going exploring wild places dressed in school uniform. It's fantastic. They must have been loving grandparents at the time. So I had this sort of sense of stories going on. And my father, the different side of the family. My father, who's 91 this year, just spent 2 days ago doing a film shoot with my daughter Alice, kayaking 2 miles around the coastline to do a beach clean with surfers against sewage. And he's a body surfer, cycles most days. And this was him in the back row with a very sketchy-looking me next to him with a dodgy moustache, like 30 years ago in the work that he was doing around changing healthcare and a whole bunch of other things. So I was interested in the idea that what we do is becomes part of our DNA. And that we inherit it from our parents, we inherit it from other people. And in the same way, we pass on our DNA through our actions to others. And I don't put many things down to luck in life, and I'm a firm believer that we make luck. But I can't put anything down to luck other than being born in this corner of Wales, which is one of the most special places that I can ever imagine being brought up. And my childhood was spent on these beaches here near St David's, which is on the extreme west coast of Wales. This is where I live now. And so I live near the beach, I live in the countryside, and I feel kind of connected to that in a way that's really different. And over the years, coming to do lectures, hearing all the stuff about people working in brands, that was never, ever part of my childhood. And for me, living in a place of wild nature that had an incredible sense of culture and history, one of the oldest places of religious worship in Britain, the cathedral here, it's where I'm not particularly religious, but it's an amazing sense of bringing people together, Frenchmen standing on their heads, whatever else they're doing. This sense of understanding what work was about. And so for me, it was a sense of play, what I might call play drive, about what is it that drives us to do what we're doing. So from a very early age, we sort of started taking off with our mates on surf trips and going, so I was down on a trip in France in a borrowed car with mates, all of whom ended up being self-employed, all of whom ended up doing things different. No one went into the corporate world because we didn't even know it existed, living where we did. And I spent my time surfing, I spent my time climbing, walking and exploring, and never interested in a lot of the stuff else that was going on. This is a slightly dodgy picture, but it's surfing in Mallorca in northern Spain. And I partly got to learn about risk when you're playing. And although it's a cliche to say that doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. But after a while, when you do play properly, you get to understand that most times you get back up again. And that the things that we are scared of are really not to be worried about. On the way, we developed a sport called coasteering, which is now kind of taken around the world. My business, TYF, took the first people to take up folk to do this. And we turned a childhood hobby of taking people to scamper around the cliffs into a sport. We now take about 5,000 people a year how to do it. But there comes a point for all of us, whatever the cliff we're leaping off, to realize it is only water underneath. And as they say, it's not the jump that ever kills you, it's the bit at the bottom. But learning how to play and spending time in really expensive restaurants with our children. And realizing we spent 2 or 3 days living on this beach, which is a couple of miles from where I live, with no money and no tents, just sleeping out and building a house out of driftwood. And it's a different kind of contact, I suppose, it put me with nature. And that's now part of the way, I guess, that's part of my family's DNA. And spending it exploring, going sea kayaking around here. We have an amazing tidal rapid off the coast where we live called the Bitches, which is one of the biggest white, this is on the sea. It's a class 4 whitewater rapid. And we ran a World Freestyle Kayaking Championships there. So for me, it was never about live entertainment, but about life entertainment and finding ways of experiencing things that were about soul and play. And I haven't had a television for 7 years or so, which has been a bit odd for my kids at times, but there's something much more interesting about watching water or watching fire, as we'll do here at Forest over the next few days, and watching sunsets, which is kind of better than anything that's on television, yet with 5 hours a day of TV consumption for every single person. That's the average. There's not enough time to spend time looking at this, or perhaps to see the patterns that we see about us in nature, to take time to do the noticing of what's going on, and notice the irony. We all spot this stuff, but with 400 or so ads a day that people see, the irony of commercial advertising to get people to buy things they don't need, all that kind of rubbish, and the safari in the city bollocks. It's kind of, what is it about? So there's something about recognizing the patterns that we're part of, and understanding our products, and understanding our lives, and understanding where people are touched. Seeing a street girl in Mumbai, a few hundred meters from the 5-star hotel I was in on a business mission for the Welsh Government. Understanding those connections. This is a 20 or so year old version of me, trendy board shorts. I was working in a gold mine in the desert in Australia. And this was what we did for a living. Mine rock at 3 grams a ton of gold. So a chunky wedding band would take 10 tons of rock to take it out. And that's what love gives. When you give someone, say, I love you, and give them a wedding band, it also comes with a 10-ton piece of stone. And we were mining this, mixing it with mercury and cyanide, and leaving that pools of stuff in the desert. And as an environmentalist, this is a really good thing to try and let go of for the rest of your life. So for me, there's something about, when we get to that point of deciding what to do, people talk about startups and talk about businesses and talk about this. I think the best ideas are not started in 72 hours or 70 days. They're started in about 7.5 seconds, which is the moment that people commit to do stuff. So if we're going to be scared of things, let's be scared intentionally, because we know what's ahead of us. And if we're going to understand risk, let's make sure it's a risk that we are aware of and that we're conscious of. So when I was mountaineering, we'd practice throwing ourselves down mountainsides with ice axes to see if you could stop. Because it's good to know that before you get to the point of falling. In kayaking, you practice the rescues before you need them. Yet, in some ways, there's this irony that we've forgotten what the risk rules are and what the safety rules are for this funny thing that we're flying around space in. So for me, there's this key piece about in the mountains, on the rock face, on the ocean, we have to know our place to stay safe. And if we don't know our place, we put ourselves in a risk that's not worth thinking about it. So I've been developing this idea of the perfect tree test. And I ask myself and ask the people we work with, how many things is that oak tree connected to decide what the perfect size is for that oak tree? And we ask this question because we're looking at nature saying, what does perfection mean? It isn't cookie cutted out. And that acorn will sense the acidity, the temperature, how deep the soil is, what the competition is, what the light is, and a whole bunch of factors in determining how big and how perfect it grows, whether it's a parkland or on a rock face. And it detects that stuff for its entire life as a tree, always, with all parts of the tree sensing. And we've ended up in this strange place where we've forgotten what the senses are. And we're in fact trying to grow an oak tree in a place where it doesn't want to go. And one of the things that's been really interesting to me is diving into this field of biomimicry and learning from the principles of nature. We can find ways that whatever we do, whatever our purpose is, if we connect that to the rules of nature and copy those in the way that we design our institutions and our businesses and our projects, then we can do things that builds on this 3.8 billion years of business evolution, not 50 years of business school. And we're the only species in the world that manages to create stuff that nothing else can eat. That's pretty odd. We would be, I'm going to write a letter to our trading standards people in the county about the naming of our species, because it's a false description. We call ourselves Homo sapiens. We should be calling ourselves Homo not very bright, Homo inattentiveness, because right now we're not doing the bit about building resilience. The coconut that's on the tree, that's on the beach here sprouting, knows that right now it can do that, but unless our projects sense what is the right place to do, it's hard to build that resilience. And on the way, this is the only framing of a model I'm going to talk about, but it occurred to us, so if nature knows what perfection looks like in a tree, how do we get to understand what it looks like in our project, our business, our life, our community? And if we take this idea that there's a spectrum between rules and reality. The rules are what you have to do. You've got to tick the box to not get caught, to not end up in jail. And most of those rules have a lag time of maybe decades between that and what's actually happening in reality, back to the oak tree test. And so government typically sits in this bottom left-hand corner. It fulfills the law, but it doesn't deliver particularly effectively. Even if you get 10 out of 10 on that scale, you successfully reach the wrong goals. Anyone who works in marketing, typical marketing, is accelerating this system. So we end up in a position where the 10 out of 10, you make a car that's perfectly legal, that uses 20 miles, performs at 20 miles a gallon. You work for an FMCG company that makes products that you don't need to buy. You make things that can never be recycled. These organizations are awesome at shipping, but they're really not making stuff that's doing anything about building resilience for the planet. But they're great at getting it out the door. In the bottom right, this is kind of tree hugger land, and I know there's a few people here, I was one once, where there's a huge level of passion and a level of understanding about a tiny bit of the jigsaw, but no knowledge about how to scale it. No knowledge about how to take that to the market. So the top right, R10, is about the real 10 out of 10. That's the oak tree test, in terms of saying, if I knew what reality was about and I shipped 10 out of 10, what would perfection look like? So I asked people to say, wherever the community is you live, how many of the children in your community aged 12 would be able to cycle if you were serious about health and well-being and reducing cost and cleaning up the air and making them live longer? The only answer we would give is 100%. Or the children are able to cook or maybe fix stuff. But we never ever reach that point when we start from the bottom left-hand corner, because you just can't nudge your way forwards. We need to create a conceptual leap and start working backwards from where we're at. And a key to this, I think, is not navigating with our wallets or business plans, but navigate with our values, which is what nature does. It values what's important: water, soil, nutrients. And what we try to do with our business, TYF, is put those values at the heart of what we do and make that the key driver and make enough money to do what Confucius would call, or recognizing that only the person who knows the meaning of the word enough will ever be rich. It's not about maximum. It's not about creating a business you can sell up and sell out and do whatever with, but doing what's important. The other thing that nature does, it optimizes. It never, ever maximizes. That's why trees don't keep growing forever. So thinking about how do you optimize the impact of your business? How do you optimize the size so big enough to do what it is that you need to do? You don't need to keep acquiring, keep growing forever. Let other people grow. Let them do what they want to do, so you get the time to do what's important. Nature supports life so that everything it makes forever increases the strength of the ecosystem that it's part of. Every leaf of the tree, every dead bug is food for something else. So whatever we do in our business and our ventures, we need to support life. We launched a project at TYF that we funded through 1% and some money from the government called EduCat, which is taking innovation thinking to solve real problems on sustainability into schools. And we've just got the funding to deliver 96,000 hours of student learning in the next 3 years, to give every child over 15 in our county 1.5 days a year on how to do this by linking up business, the skills that are in the do world with what the kids don't get taught in school. It's about integrating the systems that we're part of. We have a shop, TYF has a shop in St David's. We sell Patagonia. We're working with Patagonia to help to take their business models to change the way that Wales does business. Taking our work into business, we're working with them through 1% and doing other bits. The one thing that nature's good at doing, responding to changes in climate, is adapting. The challenge we've got is we're not adapting fast enough to what's going on. And there's a project we're developing called reality glasses. Trying to understand, if we put reality glasses on the population, what would they actually see was going on in this world of ours? What would they see in terms of the changes? And what's the minimum level? So it's going to be an online toolkit to give to every single employee, every councillor, so that they understand the minimum around biodiversity, nature, energy, demographics, so you can understand the risks. This is like hazard perception for drivers. If you're a sailor, this is competent crew, which turns people from being passengers to being active members of the boat, because right now we don't want people who don't know the rules. Through Slipstream Wales, we're turning Wales into a learning lab for the world. What this country of ours is the first in the world to legislate for sustainable development. And someone somewhere pretty quickly has got to work out how to do this stuff at speed. And we're trying to grow the best business club with Earth. So this is taking 1% for the planet as an organisation. So if anyone here is thinking of starting a business, has got a business, that's the single best business decision I ever made was to commit to 1% for the planet and give 1% of our revenues to environmental charities, because it leverages so much. And our project now is to sign up 1,000 new organisations in the UK in the next 4 months and generate £500,000 of charity. And I expect to see some hands going up here before the end of these next 3 days as we go on. We're going to try and rediscover what adventure's like and help the people who take others into nature to do so in a way that makes them pay attention to the magic of nature, understand how nature does safety, how it does risk. This is my grandfather on the Culin Ridge in Skye. But let's reimagine the bits that we do. Understand retail is not about putting stuff in landfill. How do you stop selling stuff and create a service instead? Take the clothes back, fix them, keep them going forever, because you can't do landfill with this stuff. Just because it's organic doesn't make it perfect. And so to me, tomorrow, we've got to live where our heart is. That's a key thing. Don't compromise that. Live where your heart is. And I knew my heart was in the right place when I got back from a trip to London to a station 80 miles from where I live. And someone unknown had written on the dirt on the back of my car, "Surf's up, get home quick." 80 miles from my house. And I knew that I was living in the right country when you get that kind of message graffitied onto your window. So for me, these are the kind of ups that we've got to do before we get to startup. We've got to look up, find out what's going on, become aware of our place, shape up to become fit for living on the one planet that we know that can work this. Grow up. Let go of the things that don't work us. Face up. Face up to the fact that we are mortal like everything else. Let's make our products mortal so they too can die. But let's also face up to the opportunities. Count up the people around us who can help us. Stand for the things that are important. Scale. The Wales stuff, Wales is a tiny country that's got sustainability in the constitution. If we can't make this happen globally really quickly, 3, 4, 10 years, we're screwed. So before you start up anything, make sure you do the rest of the startup stuff. And once you've done that, give it all away. IP, schmip, what's this about? For me, this is about giving away the knowledge we've got about how to do stuff as fast as possible to as many people as we can to make awesome things happen. And when you've done that, remember that at the end of the day, play is far more important than work. And work is a myth that was invented for consumerism. To get you to persuade us to live for 40 years doing rubbish stuff so that eventually we can retire and do nice things for a few years before you die. The day that we connect to the most important things in our life with the best people and live with that purpose, we'll never work another single day's work in our lives. And for me, that's the space to be in. So, and then you can go and catch a few waves with friends. Thank you.